Devil May Cry 1 is a near perfectly designed game. It is so well thought out and idiosyncratically made that the idea of a remake of it seems misguided at best. Now, I think that Capcom will and is going to remake this game, not only because of their already extensive remake library, but because of their continued and recent talks of ongoing maximizing the value of their IPs on a global scale, releasing infographics like this. When I say that you cannot remake Devil May Cry 1, I don't mean that in the literal sense, I mean it more in a philosophical one. And that is because I think there is such an intentionality behind all of its design that if you change one aspect of Devil May Cry 1, then nothing else works, thus requiring you to change everything else. And at that point, if you've changed everything, is it still Devil May Cry 1? Is this not a different game using the iconography of the original? Some would argue that this hypothetical ship of Theseus of Devil May Cry 1 is its own thing, but at that point, why not just get a Devil May Cry 6 taking the series in a new or ongoing direction with a new team, after Itsuno has now departed Capcom, similar to what Itsuno originally did with Devil May Cry 3 after everything that happened with Kamiya and Team Little Devils after the release of Devil May Cry 1. Now, I don't blame anybody who has bounced off of Devil May Cry 1, especially if you're someone who started with 3 or knows Devil May Cry through the cultural osmosis of what it's like, because the first game isn't really that at all. It's very similar to the Max Payne series in this regard, where cultural osmosis would make you think that Max Payne 1 plays like 2, this high-octane, insane power fantasy game where you feel invincible, but Max Payne 1 has a closer gameplay pace, style, and difficulty curve to Hotline Miami than it does Max Payne 2. DMC 1 isn't the woohoo, wacky, crazy combo game that is Devil May Cry 3 and onwards. If you are someone who did bounce off and is interested in quote-unquote getting it, then I highly recommend watching Matthew Matosis's commentary on the game. In my mind, there are 4 key pillars of Devil May Cry 1's design that would be changed in a potential remake, where if any one of them is changed, then the other 3 will collapse under the weight of that new pillar, that being the combat, enemy design, environmental/level design, and the camera. Like I already said, Devil May Cry 1 is not the crazy combo video simulator like the games in the Itsuno era became, but do not mistake the simplicity of its combat for lack of depth. Though if you are someone who is coming from Devil May Cry 3, then you are probably going to find the combat of Devil May Cry 1 to be boring and shallow. Your arsenal is marginally smaller with only 2 weapons, each with a few basic combos and a handful of abilities that you can unlock from the store over the course of the game. You'd be surprised at the amount of people that don't know that this game does have on-the-fly weapon swapping, at least for its melee weapons by clicking in the stick, but for guns you do need to pause and go into the menu similar to Resident Evil. You are not nearly as fast and mobile compared to the later entries. This is a game really focused around positioning and knowing the strategies and approaches that need to be taken for specific fights and specific enemy types, stemming from Hideki Kamiya's arcade experiences as a child, like how you can 2-tap a Sin Scissors by sidestepping with a shotgun. So what are you gonna do? Add more weapons or increase his already existing move list to be something comparable to DMC 5? Then that breaks the encounter design. Even a more conservative increase to his arsenal would still end up with this result. The way encounters work in DMC 1 is that you do not fight more than one enemy type at a time. None of these enemies would be able to keep up with a more robust tool set if they were given to Dante. So then you'd have to go and give the enemies more tools as well. Increase their speed, increase their aggression, increase their move lists, increase the amount you fight at a time, potentially backport enemies, possibly even start mixing and matching multiple enemy types in a single fight. But then you'll run into the issue that these corridors and areas that you're going to be fighting in were not designed with this in mind either. Do you honestly think that Malay Island was conceptualized with the ability to use Trickster? Fuck no. Both a enhanced Dante and an enhanced enemy lineup would not be able to function and be contained to these narrow corridors. So then you either have to scale up every location in the game game or just completely redesign them. And no matter which option you choose of the two, you're still gonna have to change the camera just to accommodate all of these changes. There's also no fucking way that a modern Capcom is going to release a big AAA budget game with fixed perspective cameras. This shit is the anti-broad appeal. You try to convince the average gamer to play a game with fixed perspective cameras and they'll act like you're trying to waterboard them. They see it as nothing more than an antiquated gaming technique instead of something that does have meaningful and purposeful presentation. And listen, DMC1 already had some bad camera angles in a few places. It wasn't perfect, but overall I think it was great. And anybody who complains outside of the few specific areas is just skill issue. And despite what I'm about to say, I do think that Capcom does make excellent fun games that I adore in the modern era, but they do for the most part stay incredibly safe to have that general audience mass appeal. For every Kunitsugami and Dragon's Dogma 2, you are getting the modern Resident Evil, which while good, refuses to stray away from its formulas. And even Dragon's Dogma 2 is currently getting its unique gameplay identity and philosophies sanded down in the quest of quality of life. So this puts Capcom in an awkward position. You want to remake that first game, and your two real options are completely change everything, which I think is what is going to happen, featuring a reworked combat system, reworked enemies, reworked locations, and a reworked camera that would make it have a presentation like DMC 5. And at worst, play as a weird half step between DMC 1 and 3, or straight up like DMC 5 or something on its level. But then that game isn't Devil May Cry 1 anymore. It lost all of the DNA outside of just being the literal same plot, which I don't even think they'd do that. They'd probably change the story in some regards too, with tying back in things that happened in future titles that the original Devil May Cry 1 was not written with in mind. Their other option is the way less likely door number 2, changing very little to nothing at all and just giving it the RE Engine new coat of paint, which who would that even be for? You're not gonna win over the people who bounced off this game and think it aged like milk, and the hardcore fans that love Devil May Cry 1 the way it is are just gonna play the original PS2 release. That's what I do. I'm still at least once a year booting up Devil May Cry 1 and doing a fresh save file from start to finish in a single sitting. The game is impeccable and is the most pick up and play of the entire franchise. Trying to add and change anything to extend the runtime would fuck up its perfect pacing. This is why I would be genuinely surprised if option 2 is what they take, because from my perspective, that seems like a game for no one. No matter what ends up inevitably happening, if you are someone who has or hasn't tried the original Devil May Cry 1 and think that it has aged poorly, I implore you to give it another try. It is actually such an amazing, well thought out and well designed game. It is my favorite in the franchise, even if I think that DMC 3 and 5 are also masterpieces.